Here we are. Okay, so thanks for those of you that joined today. I'm Steve Pashka, and I'm the founder and chief architect at Office365Mon, where we are all about monitoring your Office 365 tenants, which today means SharePoint Online and Exchange Online. That's going to be growing over time, but that's what we're doing today. Hopefully all you folks can see the presentation. If you can't, just kind of virtually wave in the conversation window. Also, we have a really small group today, which is good to the extent that if you folks have questions, feel free to just type them into the conversation window, and we'll address those as they come up. And we'll do it via the IM window, or we'll just unmute you if needed, whatever we need to do. So the agenda today, we're going to go ahead and look at what we call the monitoring quadrant. When we're monitoring Office 365, we're going to talk about what's included in the basic features, some of the reporting features, and then we're going to talk about some of the new features that we've added over the last few months. That includes, the last couple months, that includes the Office 365 push notifications, the on-prem probes, which is a companion piece to our cloud-based monitoring, the Office 365 help desk, which is actually a brand new feature that we just rolled out without really telling anyone just a couple days ago. And so you folks are really going to be the first ones to get a look at this, and we're actually interested in asking you some questions about it and hearing your feedback on this particular feature, because it's I would say monitoring like you probably haven't seen elsewhere to date. So I think it'll be kind of an interesting exercise. Then we'll look at what we call the 360 view of your tenant, and then talk a little bit about the developer support that we have up in Office 365 Mom. So the first thing we wanted to do is give a big thank you to all of you guys that are customers so far. We launched in March. Since that time, we've had over 53 million health checks performed. That is a lot of health checks. And we thank all of our customers. Our customer base has grown in double digits every single month since we started this. You can see some impressive and interesting numbers in this infographic. This is the infographic that we send out once a month. You'll see we added our 500th customer last month, and we're well beyond that at this point. You see a couple of other interesting stats. Just from September, we had combined across all our customers over 57 hours of downtime. We had sent out over 2,700 outage notifications in that time. We also had, it's kind of interesting, we had 19 customers that missed their SLA in September, and so they, have the information from the reports that we provide with Office 365 on to be able to go back to Microsoft and ask for a refund for missing their SLA. And I'll actually talk about a scenario where we did that a little bit later in the presentation. So Ryan's apparently making interesting comments on the side, so I'll continue on. So this is what we call the monitoring quadrant, and where we get all of this data from that we use to help determine the health of your tenant. We start out with sort of our bread and butter, what we began with, which is our cloud-based health probes, issuing probes to your tenants to ascertain whether they're up or down. We added to that the on-prem health probes, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a companion piece to that and works in conjunction with our cloud-based health probes. It's not, just to be clear, we're not monitoring anything that's on premises. We're just giving you the ability to issue some of these same health probes from your on-premise locations as well as your cloud-based service. We added the Office 365 push notifications, and I'll talk about all of these and in a little bit more detail as we get going as well. That builds on a new API that's currently in preview from Microsoft that they call the Service Communications API. and allows us to pull information in from them, so we can pull from information they provide, as well as the information that we get from our own health probes and the on-prem probes. And then the last piece, which is your users, and your users as a source of notifications. We'll talk about this is related to our new feature that we'll be talking about today, which we call the Office 365 Help Desk. So when we get to that point, we'll talk about how you can actually engage your users as part of this monitoring process. So the basic features, what do we get out of the box with Office 365 Mon? We will monitor your SharePoint Online sites and your Exchange Online mailboxes, up to 10 of each. We'll send notifications when there's outages to as many email addresses and as many text phone numbers as you would like. You get basic set of reports describing the outages that occurred within the resources that we're monitoring for you, and the performance that we're getting when we access those resources for you. And all of that is part of our basic set of features, and we'll look at some of those in a little bit more detail as well. But it's basically make sure stuff is running. When it's not running, set out notifications, and afterwards you can come in and take a look at a basic set of reports to let you know what's been going on. That's all the stuff that's part of our base monitoring solution. The other stuff that we'll be talking today are part of what we call our license packages, our enterprise license and our enterprise premium license. But all of the other things we'll talk about, you always get for free for 90 days, so you can try them out and figure out if that's something that's useful for you as well. So how do you go about setting up monitoring? Well, the process is pretty straightforward. You need to use an existing Azure AD account or create a new one for monitoring. Just as a little background for those of you who may not be familiar, when you create a new Office 365 tenant, like you sign up for SharePoint Online or Exchange Online, Microsoft will automatically provision a new instance of Azure AD for you, an Azure AD tenant. And so that's where those Azure AD accounts live that you use when you're connecting to SharePoint Online and Exchange Online. So we're going to take one of those accounts, either an existing one or one you create just for monitoring. A lot of folks will create one just for monitoring. Assuming you create one for monitoring, you'll give it a mailbox, or if you're using an existing one, you want to use an account that already has a mailbox for Exchange Online. Then you'll typically want to create a SharePoint site for monitoring, and that's just so you can use an existing site if you want to, but if you create a different SharePoint site, then you can use that just for monitoring, meaning you don't have to worry about, hey, do I have any confidential information in here? Because it's really the only purpose for that site is just for us to be able to connect to it to verify that your tenant is up and running. Then this account, whatever account you want to use for monitoring, you'll make sure that you give it at least read rights to this SharePoint site that you created. And then you'll log into our site, into the Office 365 Mon site, and you'll just go open up, office365mon.com, and up in the menus you'll see a menu that says Configure, and then under that Office 365 Mon. And when you select that, it will require you to log in, and that's when you would log in with this account that you're going to use for monitoring. Once you're in there, then you just go in. It takes about 2 minutes. There's no software to download. There's nothing to install. You basically just fill out about 3 or 4 pieces of information, and once you've completed that, then you're done, and we start monitoring your stuff. So literally within a minute or two after you've completed that configuration page, then the monitoring process begins for that. So a question from Ryan, it says a monitoring account needs an O365 license, and the license must be for the services you want to monitor, correct? So, is that correct? You're going to need a license. For example, if you want to monitor Exchange Online, then the account that you want us to connect to obviously has to have a license, right? Because when you go through this process that I just described on this page where you're setting up monitoring, you're going to be logged into the Office 365 Mon site as that account, and you're going to say, this is the account, mailbox, the UPN of the person that has the mailbox, and it's the account that you logged into the site with. So that person obviously has to have a license with Office 365 in order to have that Office 365 mailbox, that Exchange Online mailbox. And the same applies for the SharePoint site as well. In order for us to be able to connect to the SharePoint site as that particular user, then that particular user has to have rights to SharePoint Online as well. That's probably a good point to kind of explain this part of it, which is just that when you go through this process of configuring Office 365 Mon for us to connect to these resources, really what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, you go ahead and type in the UPN of a mailbox, or you type in the URL to a SharePoint site, and you're going to click a button, and that's going to redirect your browser to Azure AD. And Azure AD is going to say, okay, if you're not logged in, log in now. And it's going to say, hey, Office 365 Mon wants to be able to access this mailbox or this SharePoint site. Do you agree to that or not? And that's called the consent process that Azure AD has. And so you have to say yes or no. And once you do that, since you did all that authentication over on the Azure AD side, we don't have your username, we don't have your password, and we're not going to ask for that. We're never going to store that information. But what we get from Azure is an access token then that we can use to access that resource, meaning that mailbox or that SharePoint site. But the access to that is in the context of whatever user you were signed in as when you did that. And that's why we typically say create a new account for monitoring, because, like, for example, if you signed in as a tenant admin and went through that whole process, everything would work just fine. But obviously some folks would be concerned to say, well, gosh, it's going to say, hey, can I read your SharePoint site? And some people may think, well, gosh, if I'm a tenant admin, I have rights to every single site, and I don't want you to be able to to have access to any confidential data that we might have. If there's any concern of that kind, that's why you would set up a separate account for monitoring. You only give it access to this separate site that's set up for monitoring, and this separate mailbox is used for monitoring. And that way you don't have to be, ever have any concerns that, there might be some unintended access to other content. And then it says, can the monitoring account monitor multiple sites or mailboxes, a one-to-many mapping, so to speak? And the answer is really no, because what you're going to do is actually that's not really true. If you wanted to monitor just SharePoint sites, mailboxes are obviously different, right? Because if you were monitoring multiple mailboxes, you would obviously, have multiple accounts, one for each mailbox you wanted to monitor. SharePoint sites are obviously different, but from the perspective of how you would set that up in the Office 365 Mon side, you would still need to use different accounts to set it up in Office 365 Mon, because if you just log in with an account in Office 365 Mon and you've already configured that account to access your Office 365 Mon subscription, we assume that you want to go in and you want to work with that subscription that you've already created. So because we have this mapping of one mailbox and site to one subscription, if you want to monitor multiple sites, you need multiple subscriptions. If you want to go into multiple subscriptions, you need to use multiple accounts. Now, once you have that all set up, you can certainly go back and say, okay, well, I want to add this one account or these three accounts as administrators on all of those subscriptions, and then you can just log in as one of those accounts, and you can manage all of your different Office 365 Mon subscriptions just using one account. But to do that initial setup, you're going to have to use a separate account for each one. Okay, so now let's talk about reporting. So basic reports are part of the base monitoring services. We're going to take a look at all this in a little bit. So, and we'll look at what that is. It's basically what do my outages look like in tabular data format, and what's my performance look like. The advanced reports come with the enterprise license. That includes graphical reports of your outages, performance, availability, downtime, a bunch of things. I think there's about 11 reports in all. The report data feature also comes with the enterprise license. So we have the basic report, reports, the advanced reports, they both come from a core set of data that we have. With the report data feature, rather than using our reports, I mean, you can still use those if you want, but you can also download that raw data that we use to create the reports ourselves in our site. And you can open it and just download it as a CSV, for example, and then you just double click and open it in Excel, and you can do your own analysis in there. As well as that, with the report data feature, we also have a REST API that you can use, so you can download the data as a CSV or JSON format, and then you can plug it into your own databases, your own systems. You can integrate it with your own apps, and we actually have customers doing that today, where they have their own dashboards that they've built. They use our monitoring, and then they pull our data down from our REST API and integrate it into their dashboard. And then in addition to that, one thing that we have coming up is Power BI integration. So what I have here is a screenshot of what you'll see soon enough. This is the service provider page on Power BI, and it's when you're in Power BI up in the cloud and you say, hey, I want to add a new data source, then it brings you to this service provider page, and one of the things that you'll see shown in there soon, and I've highlighted it in purple in the bottom right corner, is us. So we have a content pack that you'll be able to use from directly from Power BI that will bring up our dashboard. This is a screenshot, an advanced screenshot of what our Power BI dashboard looks like. So we'll be providing all of these reports as well out of the box for you to use with Power BI up in Office 365. And obviously all of this is just a starting set of reports and charts that you can use in Power BI. The data source is there, so you'll be able to refresh it, pull in your data. It'll update all of those existing charts, but then obviously you can also build any kind of reports that you want yourself up in Power BI. So that's a really cool feature. That process is well underway. We've actually completed all the work and handed it off to the Power BI team, and they're going through their sort of standard vetting process right now that they do anytime they bring on a new service provider. So in answer to the question, is there a charge for the Power BI integration? The answer is no, there's not a separate charge for that. That's going to be included with the report data feature. The report data feature is part of our enterprise license. The enterprise license is $49 a month. We'll talk about that at the end. So if you've signed up for the report data feature, the Power BI integration is going to be included in that. Okay, so let's take just a quick peek at the some of the reports. So give me a second here, and I'll switch over to the browser. And we'll give it a second here. It should be, it says it's currently presenting. I know it takes a few seconds for it to kind of kick out. So I'll assume you guys can see this now. The first thing you notice, this is our home page. One of the things that we put right on the home page is what we call real-time monitoring stats. And so you can see right here, this is the cumulative uptime that we're monitoring for all of our Office 365Mon customers. We update this roughly once a day. So we pull in, how many customers we have, what the number of outages have been, and determine the cumulative uptime for both SharePoint Online and Exchange Online. So this is a really nice feature if you just want to know, hey, what's going on? Just go up to our website, look on the home page, and it's right there for you. But to go into reporting, we'll go ahead and we'll go into the basic reports first. And as this comes up, you'll see the two really that folks use most often are the two on top, the tabular reports. So the health checks, this is just a snapshot of the most recent health checks that we performed. It usually covers about the previous 30 minutes or so. You can see which resources we're trying to access. You can see, when we did it. You can see what the performance was like, what was the response time to get a response back from the resource, and whether it worked or not, what the HTTP response code was that we got back for that. So we have these for all of the resources that we're monitoring, and it's a good way just to see at a snapshot at any given point in time, hey, how have things been going for the last half hour or so. We'll go back here, we'll look at outages. The outages, again, in the basic reports, it's just a simple tabular data format. So you can see these are all of the outages that have occurred, at any time on all of the resources that I'm monitoring in this Office 365 Mon subscription. So you can see here are all the outages and how long each outage was for my mailbox. As we scroll down here for this particular site that I'm monitoring, you can see how many outages there were, what the reasons for them were. You see this was unauthorized, internal server error, etc. Those are really the most common ones. If you want to see what our overall responsiveness is like, so from a performance perspective for all our customers, you can see this as you hover over it. You can see how long on average it's taking for us to connect to these resources on behalf of our customers. If we go into the My Features page, then in here you can see there's advanced reporting right up here. So we'll click on Explore and we'll go into advanced reporting. If we go ahead and look at the recent outages, this is the outages for all of the resources that I've monitored in this subscription. You'll see there's one really big one here in blue, which is this SharePoint site. So if we just click on these guys in the legend, it actually pulls them off of the chart, and we can look just at the particular resource that we want to view. We can see in this case it shows back here on April 25th, there was this huge outage. It was like 7,580 seconds, which is, I can tell you, is a really long time. And we'll talk about that more in a bit. But you can also see, like, I haven't monitored this one for a while. Like, its last outage was April 29th. So if I want to say, well, show me something recent. I know I'm monitoring my mailbox right now, and I'll uncheck that. And now I can see on my mailbox, well, there was an outage back on, October 18th, so just a couple days ago for about a minute and a half. The average response time when you get into the advanced reports, again, and the advanced reports are part of the premium license. I'm sorry, enterprise license, just the enterprise license. Then, you can see the performance of your individual tenant, and you can see it laid over the performance of what all of our customers are getting as a whole. So for example, you see the blue bar, you can tell from the legend, the blue is the average Exchange customer, the yellow is the average SharePoint customer. So if I want to say, I just want to see like what my Exchange performance is like compared to the average Office 365 Mon customer, and I'm just going to click on the SharePoint average guy to uncheck him, and I'm going to uncheck my SharePoint site, and now I'm looking just at Exchange, just to see how's my Exchange Online mailbox performing relative to everyone else, and it's actually doing really well. There's really not even any outliers in there. I'm at or better than the average performance of the rest of the Office 365 Mon customers. Monthly availability and advanced reports, that's another really popular one. This is really where we say, okay, this is what your actual availability was like in Office 365 for this given month, for this given resource. So if we look in here in October, I can see, okay, my mailbox is at 99.98. These other resources are at 100. In September, my mailbox was 99.96. That site was 100. This site was 99.99. And then as you kind of scroll down, you kind of look down here, here's April, and you see that site, wow, 99.69. Well, that corresponds back to that outage that I was showing you, where there was that outage that was 7,900 seconds or whatever. And you can see that my availability for that month was only 99.69. Now, since the SLA for Office 365 is 99.9, that means I missed my SLA that month. So I was able to actually go ahead and get a refund for that particular month. And I just showed them, hey, here's my stats. My availability was only 99.69 for that month. In terms of why you have outages, this is a good thing to look at, the outages by reason. The most common one, internal server error. That's what we see most frequently. What's kind of also interesting is because we do monitoring different than Office 365 does itself, we monitor on the front end, which means that we also get these unauthorized errors, which actually accounted for 15% plus of the outages. And really what that is that's when there's some problem with the Azure Active Directory infrastructure, not being able to authenticate us successfully to get in there. So that's, if you're an end user and you're trying to connect and you can't authenticate, then you're not going to be able to connect to your Office 365 site either. And then just finally, real quick, just so you can see it, the report data access. So that's what I was talking about. That's what's included, or going to include the Power BI. So if you just want to get the download the raw data, then you can just come in here. You can pick whichever data set you want, and you can just click on it and download it. Now the other thing that we'll do, here's an example of where I have multiple Office 365 subscriptions. So you have the option to either download the subscription that you're currently viewing, which in this case you'll see I'm under the subscriptions drop down. It says Office 365, and I also have a SamuelMan.com subscription. So if I just click on outages, it'll download the data for that subscription. If I click on this one, it'll download the data for all of the subscriptions that I'm monitoring. So I'm going to go ahead and hop back to the presentation here. Okay. Oh, and it started me back at the beginning, which is not supposed to do. Yay, link. Okay, so let's get back to where we were. Okay, so we talked about reporting. Okay, so let's talk about the push notifications now. So in order to use our push notification service, it requires you to enable this Office 365 Service Info integration. And you do that from the configuration page on our site. And the reason why I call this out separately is because unlike Exchange Online and SharePoint Online, you can use any user account you want to go ahead and set that up for us to monitor. But if you're going to enable the Office 365 Service Info integration, you have to be a tenant, an Office 365 tenant administrator. So in order to do that, if you haven't done it already, you need to make that tenant administrator an admin on your Office 365Mon subscription. Then you need to log into the Office 365Mon site using that account. And then you can go down and configure and turn on the Office 365 Service Info integration. In response to the questions about were all those reports using Power BI, all of the reports that I just showed, none of those were built with Power BI. All of those come out of the box, and you view those in our website. So for the push notifications, once you set up that Service Info integration, we use this new Service Communications API to track status changes for the features within the services that you have in Office 365. So for example, a service within Office 365 would be like Exchange Online, and a feature within that service would be something like calendaring and mail or scheduling or whatever else, and we'll take a look at that so it makes more sense. And then with the push notification feature, you can sign up to get notifications when any of those features enters a state that you want to track. And there's a finite list of states that you can track, and we'll take a look at that. And you can just check the box and say, okay, these are the states that I want to track for my features. And so when a feature in your Office 365 tenant changes to that state, then we go ahead and we send notifications out to whatever channels you've set up for notifications in Office 365Mon. So the push notifications are part of the Enterprise Premium license. They're free for the first 90 days. But let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. So we'll switch back to our browser, which is coming up now, and you guys should be seeing it shortly. So if we go in here to configure, and we'll say configure Office 365Mon. So this is where you set up everything in Office 365Mon. This is where you would, if you want to add an admin to your Office 365Mon subscription, you do it right here. This is where you configure, which email addresses and phone numbers you want notifications to go to. And this is where you set up the SharePoint site and the Exchange Online site that you want us to monitor using the subscription. Now, to do the integration with Office 365, then you would actually, let's change subscription. Let's change one that doesn't have it set up yet. I'll go to SamuelMan. It doesn't have it set up yet, so you would just click the Enable button. And when you click the Enable button, again, you have to be an Office 365 tenant admin, and then we can go ahead and set that up for you. Once that integration is set up and confirmed, then we'll show you these list of status events. And so you can choose which of these events you want to be notified for. And again, this is based on Microsoft and Office 365 pushing out changes via their API to say, hey, this service is in this particular state now. And what we do is we monitor what they are, and so we're aware of when they change from one state to another. When they change to a state, if it's one of these states that you're interested in, then we'll go ahead and we'll send out that notification email that I mentioned earlier. Or I should say notifications that I mentioned earlier. And again, the notifications that we send out, it's going to go to all of these that you've defined up here in your notification info. So all of the email addresses we'll send emails to, all of the text phone numbers we'll send text messages to. So I'm going to go ahead and pop back to the presentation. And we'll go back and show that again. Hopefully it won't take us back to the beginning this time. We'll see. Oh, that's better. Not exactly where we were, but closer to where we were. And so here's an example of what the push notifications look like. So on the left, the picture on the left is a set of text messages that were sent out. So this particular person, Abraham, said, hey, I want to monitor for the service restored state, for example. And so he got a text message when that particular service entered the service restored state. And on the when we get to the last demo of the day, we'll go into the My Info page, and I'll show you what all of these services and features are. So you'll see exactly, these are all of the features that can be monitored within your service, and those are the ones where Office 365 sets the state. We monitor the changes in that state, and then we send out these notifications. So these are the text messages. Here's an example. Oops, sorry. This is an example of the on the right-hand side, the email that came out as well when one of those state changes occurred. Okay, now let's go to the next slide. Okay, on-prem probes. So on-prem probes is a new feature that we released in September. It's a companion to the cloud service. Again, to be clear, we're not monitoring your on-prem SharePoint sites. We're monitoring your cloud services, your Office 365 services, but we're issuing those probes from your on-premise sites. And the reason why we do that is, again, when you kind of think about, we talk about the quadrant of info that we look at, is, if we're just using our cloud-based probes, what that, lets you know is that everything up in the cloud is working, right? So our service to the Office 365 service, that's all working good. But what we have seen, of course, is that there's times when on premises a customer still isn't able to connect. And so what we do with the on-prem probes, it gives us the capability to do a couple of things. One, by issuing these probes from the on-premise location, it sends the same exact type health probe as we do from the cloud. But when it's unable to connect to that Office 365 resource, it's going to log those issues to the event log. It's going to go through a set of diagnostics to try and figure out more about what the problem is, and it's going to log that to the event log also. So when it's unable to connect to the Office 365 resource, it's going to go through, it's going to check your local network cards, make sure that they're up and working. It's going to check your DNS. It's going to make sure both that it's available, and it's also going to tell you how it's resolving names, because that's another problem that we've seen sometimes is DNS gets misconfigured and it's resolving addresses that aren't, like public IP addresses for these public resources. So we'll do a check and we'll put in the event log exactly, what IP address it resolved certain names to. We'll check your gateway to make sure that we can reach the gateway, because you can't get to your gateway, you can't get out. And then we check one random internet resource that we let you choose. By default, we just use yahoo.com, but you can put in whatever you want. And really the goal there is for us to be able to say, hey, is every single thing going out to the internet down, or is just the Office 365 resource down? And again, as we do each one of these checks, when we find issues, we put them in the event log. The reason why we don't send notifications limitations on those is because obviously, if some part of the channel between on-prem and the internet is broken, then we're not going to be able to push out those notifications to you. So instead, we put it in the event log, the local event log on whatever server or servers you have it running. And then that way you can monitor the event log locally with your on-prem tools for these types of events. One other thing worth pointing out is that we also allow you to set performance thresholds when it's issuing these health probes, because we had a customer say, well, yeah, it may be working, but maybe it's taking like 40 seconds, for example, to connect to a SharePoint site, and that's not really acceptable. So we allow you to set a threshold to say, hey, if it takes longer than X number of seconds to connect to an Office 365 resource, then we'll go ahead and we'll log that to the event log as well, so you can see that also. The other thing that we do as part of this, as we're monitoring these things, we obviously log the issues, but we also write to a CSV file for each probe that we send out. So you can also go back and look at these CSV files and see exactly what's been going on, what the performance has been like, what the response has been as well. So the on-prem probes are part of the Enterprise Premium license, but they're free for the first 90 days. So, and then just so you can have an idea what it looks like, up on the top left, that's an example of a CSV file that came from the on-prem probe. So you can see it saying, hey, this date and time, I issued a health check to this particular resource. You can see how long it took, what the response time was for that resource. You can see what the status code we got back and the status reason, a 200, that's okay. On the bottom right, you'll see a screenshot of the event log where we actually simulated an outage by just turning off we're basically unplugging the network card. And you'll see that, the on-prem probe determined, oh yeah, I can't get out. And so it went through its series of checks. And that's why you see, all of these errors listed up above here. It's saying, hey, I couldn't connect to Azure to get, the access token to connect to that resource. And then these ones that are up above the item that's highlighted are the errors saying, hey, I couldn't get a DNS, I couldn't reach DNS, I couldn't reach my gateway, I couldn't reach the internet site, etc. And I'm going to keep going. Abraham, I see you have an ongoing dialogue in the IM window, but if you need me to jump in on something, then just poke me and we'll take care of that. Okay, so now let's move to the Office 365 Help Desk, which is the new feature that we just released a couple of days ago. And like I say, it's kind of I think a different and unique way of looking at outage monitoring, and something we want to hear what you guys think about. So we call it the Office 365 Help Desk, and it normalizes another resource that's really kind of typically underutilized for monitoring outages, and that's your users. And the way we do it is you go into our site, and we'll go through this process. You go into our site, and you go to where you configure the Office 365 Help Desk feature, and you say, I want to get a new phone number for this type of service, where a service would be either Exchange Online or SharePoint Line, and you tell us the geographic location of the number, and we have a fixed list of geographies where we can get phone numbers for you. So you say, go get that phone number, and we acquire it for you. And then what you do after that is your users can text that number when they're having an outage with that service. So for example, you set one up for SharePoint Online, you set one up for Exchange Online, you tell all your users, hey, if you guys have an outage with Exchange Online, just text this number. Doesn't matter what you type in there, you can type in whatever you want, but just text that number. Same thing with SharePoint Online. Then the other thing that you do in our site is you set a threshold to say how many text messages you need to receive and in what time period in order to trigger an alert to your Office 365Mon notification list. So all those emails and phone numbers. So for example, you say, hey, if I get 3 text messages in the span of 5 minutes, then I want that to be considered an outage. And if that happens, go ahead and send out notifications to all my Office 365Mon notifications. You can also configure text messages that are sent back to your users. So after a user texts you something that says, hey, Exchange is down or whatever, you configure what the text message will be that goes back to that user, or if you leave it blank, we don't send anything back to them. You also have the ability to block phone numbers, to get outage reports, to get message logs, etc. And Office 365 Help Desk, just available, is going to be part of the Enterprise Premium license, but like everything else, it's free for the first 90 days. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to take a look at that. And we'll bring back Internet Explorer. Okay, so I think everyone should be viewing or close to viewing. So if we go up here to the Configure menu, and now you'll see Configure, we have Office 365 Help Desk. If we select that, and again, I have multiple subscriptions, so it's showing me the Help Desk configuration for Office 365Mon subscription. And you'll see a few things. So up here are the phone numbers that I acquired. I got one for SharePoint Online, and I got one for Exchange Online. When I want to get a new one, I just pick whichever service I want to get it for, and then I pick whatever country I want that number to be based in. So here's the list of countries that we support right now. We actually utilize our partner Twilio in coming up with these phone numbers, and so the list of countries that we support is really based on what they support. And so these are the places where we found we could, or locations where we found we could reliably and regularly get a phone number that we could use for texting. So it had to be, available in a specific geo, and it had to support texting. So I went ahead and selected whatever geo. I'll select this one, and it should say I can't do that. And it says I'm in trial mode now. I can only get one phone number, and so that's something to be aware of. While it's in trial mode, you can only get one phone number to play with because there's an expense associated with this. Once you go into production mode or acquire a license for it, then you can get up to 6 phone numbers right now. So I set up the phone numbers. Now that I have these phone numbers, users can start texting them, and we'll get notifications back here at Office 365Mon. Now, in terms of deciding, how many messages should I get to trigger a notification, we do that right here. So here I say, hey, if I get 3 text messages in a 5-minute period, then that's going to trigger a notification. And that's how we set those thresholds for when we'll alert you that your users are letting you know, hey, something's going on. Down here are the 2 different types, the 2 different text messages that we'll send in response. So if someone texts us, sends us a text, and we haven't reached this threshold yet, in this case 3 text messages in a 5-minute period, then we send this text message in reply that says, hey, thanks for your message. We're monitoring the situation. We'll contact you if needed. Once we reach this threshold, and so we've quote-unquote triggered an outage, then the response that we'll send at that point and for the next 30 minutes following that point, because sort of assuming, hey, if there's an outage, people may continue to send us text messages, then we'll send them this message. And in this case, we'll say, hey, thanks for notifying us. We're currently experiencing an outage. We'll email everyone when the outage is over. This is just what I put in for my message. You can obviously type in whatever you want. If you want to block certain numbers, like if you find certain employees are abusing the privilege, or for whatever reason, you can add as many phone numbers to block as you want right here. You just add it in there. And then once we actually receive messages, we'll keep a list of all the messages. We'll show all the messages that you've received over the last 30 days. You can go ahead and export that data to CSV or in JSON format. So if you want to pull it into Excel and do some analysis on it, you can do that. Also, when we've actually had an outage declared because of the text messages, we note that up here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get on my phone now, and let's see, maybe let's make Exchange down. So I'm going to start sending outages. So this is webinar down, and send another message. And so I don't know if you heard that, but I'm starting to get a text message back saying, hey, this is, we've received your notification. we're monitoring, I mean, whatever that message was that I typed on there. So I'll go ahead and I'll say, let's see, I'll send a couple others just to simulate it. Okay, so now if I go ahead, I'll just like refresh the list here. You'll see I have what, a couple, like three from today, from the 20th, one for Exchange Online and two for SharePoint Online. If I go ahead and refresh that, you'll see now here's all these that I just sent for Exchange. You know, webinar down, down, really down, mail down, I'm down. So all of these that I just sent in. If I go ahead and refresh this, you'll see, okay, now on the 20th, which is today, we just declared an outage for Exchange Online. And so I don't know if you could hear that in the background, but I just got a separate text message because I've configured my subscription to send me a text message when, you know, my tenant has an outage. So basically by putting this, you know, in the hands of our users, we're able to use them as a resource as well to let us know, you know, hey, something's down. Now the beauty of this as well is that it really fits into what I like to call the millennial mindset, which is, you know, I don't want to be hassled with calling people. I don't want to be hassled with going to a website and filling out forms. I don't want to do any of that. I just want something that's like Snapchat easy. And so what I did on my phone is I took these phone numbers up here that we use for outages, and I just added them to my contact list in my phone. And so I just say, you know, send it to, EXO outage, and I just type in whatever I want. I can type in a single letter. It doesn't matter. I just have to send a text message to that number, and that's all it is, and away it goes. So I wanted to go ahead and, so as Abraham points out, currently designed to have separate numbers for each customer. But I wanted to kind of momentarily pause here. Like I say, we just rolled this out. Sorry, I'm going to stop presenting so you don't just see a black screen. And we wanted to get some feedback because, like I say, it is kind of different, I think, from how we, sort of look at monitoring or historically have tried to track monitoring. So just wanted to give a second. Happy to sort of have a, give and take conversation for what you folks think about this. Is this, interesting to you? Is this something, you guys, think would be useful? Are there things that adjustments you think that might be needed to it to make it more useful to you? Just any kind of feedback or comments you have. Now is a good kind of pause point to kind of jump on, throw it in the IM window, unmute yourself. You guys should all be able to unmute yourself. Any sort of feedback at all? We'll just sort of pause here for a few seconds to see who is the brave person in the audience here today. And again, if it's easier, just unmute yourself, hop on, and we'll talk through it. Or if you would prefer to type, just type in.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
So one of the things with the SHD and some of the monitoring in the cloud is it's all tenant based, and so I'm really hopeful that this will give us more user-based type of monitoring. Because as you know, when something shows up in the SHD, it seems like the whole company is on fire. And I'm hoping we can use your solution to maybe track individuals or at least understand better what the real impact is, as opposed to just a blanket statement of problems are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And there's actually a couple of good points out of that. So one, again, we log all of these phone numbers. You have the phone number that sent the text message in. You can export it to a CSV. So you can just click on the link to export it to a CSV, and at any point in time that you want, right, you can go through and get the CSV, open it up in Excel, and do your own analysis on, hey, where are we seeing outages? What's going on with that? The other point of that's really interesting and kind of aligns with the point that Tony Redmond, for those of you folks that are familiar with him, made recently, is that, as Microsoft adds more customers, the overall uptime percentages tend to get higher. And we see the same thing at Office 365Mon. And the reason is just because, as you add more users, you basically increase that denominator when you're dividing the total number of outage, minutes or seconds, whatever you're using, into that number. That number gets bigger and bigger, and so individual outages may not appear to affect the service as a whole as much as maybe they might have in a previous month or months. But that doesn't mean that you're not still having individual tenants that are just having a terrible day, right? Something's gone wrong for whatever reason, and while the service as a whole may look like, hey, it's doing great, these individual tenants obviously are having problems. And that's really the distinction that you get with a service like Office 365Mon versus just looking at Service Health Dashboard. Service Health Dashboard is for everybody. But if you're one of those folks that are going, geez, we're just having a terrible day, we can't get to our SharePoint Online site, we can't get to our Exchange mailbox or whatever, that's what Office 365Mon gets you, right? I mean, kind of going back to one of that, in fact, one of the reports I was showing you in the advanced reports, you're looking at your individual tenant uptime, right? You're not looking at the service uptime as a whole. So that's a couple of good distinctions to make. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on since we only have 10 minutes left. And of course, if there are more comments, we'll actually absolutely come back to talk to those.
John, did you have a comment to make here? Not sure it went through. John made an interesting point about also helps with the customer expectations when they get immediate response on text.
Right. Yeah, that was really nice. When I said, again, like when I sent the text message, I'll actually just go back and look at my text messages right now. So when I first started reporting that, the first couple or whatever, I got the, thank you for your message. We are monitoring the situation and we'll contact you if needed. And I mean, I got that, within a few seconds after I sent in my text message. And then, by the time I sent in the fourth one, because I said my threshold was 3, right? 3 messages in 5 minutes. Then the text message I got back said, thank you for notifying us. We're currently experiencing an outage. We'll email everyone when the outage is over. And John's point is a great one. I mean, there's no other modality out there where you're going to get that kind of back and forth feedback that quickly, between your users and IT. I mean, everyone feels better because everyone sort of feels like, okay, I know what's going on now, right? I mean, I may be kind of, unhappy that my SharePoint site is down or my mailbox is down, but I didn't have to go through, a half an hour screwing around, trying to call in help desk, go through, this number, that number, push option 3 for this, push option 4 that, all that sort of yada yada. All that's boom, it's out of the way. It's just back and forth. It took about 2 or 3 seconds. I sent a text message and I got a message back and I knew exactly, what's going on. So that's a great point, John. Okay, so I'm going to plunge ahead here so we don't fall too far behind. I will say we're absolutely more than happy to stay on past the hour. If you guys have questions, comments, whatever, we'll take as much of your feedback as you want to provide to us. So we're absolutely thrilled to get that. So to finish on, for those who need to be done in 8 minutes, the 360 view of things, this is what we call the My Info page, is our 360-degree view of the state of your Office 365 resources. So you go to that page, you see your basic subscription info, you see the current status of your resources that we're monitoring according to us. You'll see the current status of your Office 365 features and services according to Microsoft. Those are not always in sync because we will alert you to outages pretty much in every case before Microsoft does, because Microsoft is looking at, again, going back to Ryan's point, Microsoft is looking at the service as a whole and we're looking just at your individual tenant. We'll show you any messages that Microsoft has for you on the Service Health Dashboard, and we'll show you the overall availability of your monitored resources for the current month. And the My Info page is included with the base monitoring service. So let's take a quick peek at that. We'll show our browser. And it says it's coming in now. You should be seeing it any second now if you're not already. So if we go up here to features and we go down to the My Info page. Okay, and so here we see a number of things, the 360-degree view. First, we have the basic information about your subscription that we have right here. Here we have the monitored resources. So for this subscription, we're monitoring this SharePoint site and this Exchange site. And right now, according to us, both of these services are up. Over here, we have the services and features that Office 365 tells us about. So this is what I was saying earlier, where there's services and then there's features within a service. So if we click on Exchange Online, it says Service Restoring. If we click on that, these are all the individual features within Exchange Online. So we can see with all of these features that the email and calendar access feature is in the service restoring state. And that's why the Exchange Online service as a whole is in the service restoring state. If we just go like Skype for Business is another popular one. They have a bunch of features. They're all green. If we go down here to SharePoint Online, it's an extended recovery, and we see that the SharePoint Features feature is in the extended recovery state. So again, if you had signed up, for example, if you had signed up for the Office 365 push notifications for extended recovery, then when the SharePoint Features feature had entered the extended recovery state, you would have got a notification to let you know, hey, this SharePoint Online, SharePoint Features and the SharePoint Online service is now in the extended recovery state. So this is a nice little dashboard of the services as Office 365 is reporting them. Now, let's look at SharePoint Online again. Okay, so the SharePoint features are in extended recovery. Here's the current list of messages over on the right that Office 365 is reporting. So if I go into SharePoint Online, here's a list of messages for SharePoint features. So we can look at the SharePoint features messages and see anything that might be in there. If we click on that, then we can see the same messages that you would get in the Office 365 Service Health dashboard. But now you can just get all of this in here. And that's, again, kind of the point, is that you can drill down into any of these things. Actually, that's a bad one. But you can drill down to any of these things. You can see all of your features, all of your services, all of your messages, you know, what we're saying your availability, your status is like for the sites we're monitoring, and then your availability for the month as well. So we can say for October, my Exchange Online availability is 99.98, and my SharePoint Online availability is 100%. So that's what we talk about, you know, the 360-degree view. I mean, all of these resources, that quadrant of information that we talked about, we pull it all together right here. One other quick just point I'll make is that if you ever have a problem with your Office 365 subscription and you need email support, come to the My Info page. We have your subscription ID right down there at the bottom, and you can go ahead and email us that, and that will help us be able to help you out a little bit faster. So I'm going to go back to our presentation now. We're running low on time, but that's okay. We're just about done. We'll see where Skype leaves us. This point in our presentation, it's been kind of a different location each time. Well, that's close, but it's still a few slides off from where we were. Okay. So the developer love, really the point here is that we have several APIs for you to manage and use with your monitoring quadrant. The report data feature has a set of REST endpoints, so you can download data for one or for all of your subscriptions. You can download it in CSV or in JSON format. The subscription management API lets you create new subscriptions programmatically, as well as manage all aspects of them. So who your admins are, where you send notifications, what resources you're monitoring. You can do all of that through our subscription management API. You can also issue health probes yourself using our infrastructure, either your monitored resources or any Office 365 resource that you have access to with the subscription management API. And you can use all of these things to build your own custom reports, to integrate into your own custom applications, etc. So to conclude, we have this quadrant of tenant data for monitoring and notifications. We have our cloud-based probes. We have our on-prem companion. We have the Office 365 service integration. And then we have your users now as a source of information about outages. The base monitoring services are the cloud-based monitoring, the alerting, the basic reports, all of that are free. The enterprise license allows you to go to have more than 10 subscriptions if you want. And I'm going to make just a real quick point here. Most people say, well, how many resources do I monitor? What we find is that in the general case, if you're monitoring a single SharePoint site and a single mailbox, that's generally good enough, because you usually don't have like one SharePoint site down and every other SharePoint site up, or one mailbox down and every other mailbox up. In most cases, when one thing is down, your tenant is down. But we do allow you to set up more than 10, so if you're like, well, I'd really like to monitor 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 or whatever, then you can do that just for your own comfort level. So the enterprise license, you can use up to 10 with the base monitoring services. If you want more than 10, then you need to go to the enterprise license. So you can get more than 10. You get the advanced reports with it. You get the report data feature, which includes Power BI, and you get the subscription management API. That's $49 a month. And then the enterprise premium license includes everything that's in the enterprise license, but it also includes the Office 365 push notifications, the on-prem probes, and the Office 365 help desk. That's $149 a month. It's not currently available for purchase in the site since we just rolled out the help desk feature, but it will show up in the list of features that you can purchase in the next couple weeks probably. And then the other things are all of these features, that even the ones that cost money, they're always free for 90 days when you sign up or when we add a new feature. So like we just rolled out Office 365 Help Desk. So all of our existing customers, they got that feature turned on for free for 90 days so they can go try it out. So then finally, to get started, go to Office 365Mon, set up your subscription, start monitoring your resources, go beyond the simple cloud probes, use the on-prem probes, check out the Office 365 info integration and the help desk. And as we always say, stay in the know and stay in control. That's what we're all about. As an added bonus that we have today for those of you that joined the webinar, if you email us at support@office365mon.com, you can mention that you saw this in the webinar and you can get a coupon for 50% off for either our enterprise or our enterprise premium license for 6 months. Just tell us in the email, what it is you're interested in getting, and we'll set you up with that. And with that, we hit at exactly 1 hour, which is incredibly difficult to do. We're, like I said, we're here for any questions, any comments, any feedback, anything that you have to say. Please share it with us now. If you don't have time now, at any time, feel free to email us at support@office365mon.com and say, hey, I want some more information, or hey, I really would like this feature, or hey, I would like this feature to work differently. Any of that kind of feedback we would love to hear, because from when we first released to today, I would say anywhere from 50 to 60% of the features that we've rolled out since we first went live has been based on feedback from our customers. So we take that feedback really seriously. We incorporate it, into the product in any way we can. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap up the main part of the presentation. Me and Abraham will stay on again for folks that have questions and whatnot. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending the webcast today.